بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا، إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. رويت تعلم والتعليم وتذكر والتذكير، ونفي لفار استفادة، وحتى أتمس بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. دلالة على خير ابتغاء وجه وضوء بقرب ضبابه سبحانه وتعالى. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا، وينفعنا بما تعلمنا، وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما، إنك على كل شيء قدير. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, all of you are well. Uh, please forgive the last minute time adjustment, but this time for Salat al-Maghrib is now has uh, entered, and so I needed to pray Salat al-Maghrib prior to starting. So, but alhamdulillah. Right. So, inshallah, our purpose today is to try to do some preparatory discussions in regards to the month of Ramadan. And so, inshallah, the way that we're going to do this is that we're going to first look at some of the ahkam, some of the rulings in relation to Ramadan, and then we will have a discussion in relation to the aspects of trying to perfect the Ramadan, بإذن الله. So, inshallah, we intend to have a time period for Q&A. But if questions come up as we go, then depending on the time and the nature of the question, we may answer some questions as we go. And so this is going to be some of the basic ahkam, some of the basic rulings in regards to fasting. And this is primarily going off of the works of the Shafi School of Law. And this was actually based upon a compilation from one of our teachers, Sheikh Amjad Rashid. And I have to say, as the Prophet ﷺ mentions that, man lam yashkuna nas lam yashkuna Allah, that whoever does not thank people has not thanked Allah. So I just want to say, Jazakallahu khairan to Sister Mina, who was the one who actually prepared these slides, and she did a was actually quite surprised at how well these slides were put together. So I just want to say Jazakallah khair for to her for putting these together for us. Alhamdulillah. So without further ado, inshallah, we continue. So what we'll be looking at is that we'll be looking at the ruling on fasting itself. What are the integrals? What are some of the recommended measures? Excuses that permit one not to fast, making up missed fasts, and also those things associated with the missing of a fast in terms of payment and expiation. And so, inshallah, into it. So the ruling on fasting. So the ruling on fasting is that fasting is considered to be a fard ayn. It's considered to be a personal obligation for every Muslim who has reached puberty. And so when we say puberty, according to the Shafi School of Law, there are three signs of puberty. The first one being for a man is that if he has a nocturnal emission, that if a man has a nocturnal emission, then that is a sign of puberty, meaning that sexual fluid has exited from him. Uh, for a woman, this also applies as well. Women, generally speaking, don't have nocturnal emissions as commonly as men do. But if a woman were to also have a nocturnal emission, then this would also be a sign of puberty. The second one is specifically for women, and that is the oncoming of a menstrual cycle. So if a woman has a menstrual cycle, then that is her sign that she has now reached the age of puberty. Now, both of these situations, the nocturnal emission as well as the coming of menstruation, all have to be done once a person has at least reached approximately 9 lunar years of age. And why we say that is that if a person were to have one of these things happen to them prior to that, so for example, you have a 6 or 7 year old having some of these things happen to them, we would still not consider that child to be pubescent. So you can say that another condition for these signs of puberty is that the individual be at least of 9 lunar years of age. And then the third sign of puberty is that if neither of these things happen, meaning that a woman never has a menstrual cycle up until a certain point, or a man never has a vision, then just by reaching the age of 15 lunar years, that is a time when a person is going to be considered to be pubescent. So just by reaching the age of um, 15 lunar years, a person would be considered to be pubescent. And then the next integral, or for I say, should I say the next condition of the fast, meaning of those who are required to fast, is a person has to be sane. Is that if a person is, um, in Arabic we say majnoon, meaning that they do not have control of their mental faculties, then this person is excused. And so this goes in regards to whether the person is actually insane or whether the person is in a coma. If there is something that is preventing this individual from being able to have control of their mental intellect, then this person is not going to be of those who are obliged to fast. And then the third one is that the person is actually able to fast, meaning that they have the physical capacity to fast. And so we will discuss this in a little bit more detail as we go along. But having the physical capability to fast is also a criterion. So that such that if a person had an illness or they just were not up to it, they may not be required to fast. But we will discuss how that would work itself out as we continue within that. And so it is not obligatory for a non-Muslim, a child, an insane person, or someone unable to fast, such as someone in advanced years or someone who is continuously sick, to fast. However, it's not to say that, for example, some of these individuals can't fast. So, for example, a non-Muslim, they can fast. We would just say that that fast would not be counted as a valid fast. So, if a non-Muslim wishes to fast to have the experience, they definitely can. But we would say that it would not count as a valid fast in terms of worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the criterion for worship to be considered to be valid in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, as he mentions in the Quran itself, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Those people who believe and they do righteous good deeds. And so the aspect of good deeds being accepted is that also the person believes as well. Or for example, a child, even though they're not obliged to fast, it is recommended to encourage them to fast, even if it's only part of a day. So for example, if you have a young child and they're not necessarily at the point of being able to fast the entire day, then they could fast, at least a portion of the day. This way, it becomes something that they're accustomed to, something that they may even enjoy, such that when it does become an obligation, it's not a major issue for them. Okay. So now, in terms of the integrals of the integrals of the fast are very quite simple. There's only two. And it's funny because some fiqh books, some books of Islamic law will actually mention three, and they'll mention that one of the integrals is the person themselves, that, you have to have the actual fasting person. But from a practical aspect, there's only two that applies to any individual person. There's one, the intention, and then two, abstaining from those things that nullify the fast. And so the intention is something that relies on the heart, but we'll get to some of the details of that. So the intention is to intend to fast. Its location is in the heart, but it is sunnah to say with the tongue. When Abdulimi says, I intend to fast tomorrow as a current performance of the obligation of this year's Ramadan for Allah Most High. Now, the thing is that this is not something that a person necessarily has to say or necessarily has to bring to mind, per se. However, the ulama, they mention these type of things so that a person more or less understands the uh, the aspect of knowing what it is that a person is going to be engaging in, because they mention about the intention is that the intention is something that it is an acute awareness of beginning an action. And so for example, the Arabic of the intention is نويت صوم غد عن أداء فرض يوم من أيام شهر رمضان هذه السنة لله تعالى. So this is something that, the ulama have mentioned. And there are different reasons why they mention certain aspects of it. For example, they have the aspect of nawaitu, being in the past tense and so on and so forth. But essentially, what, some of my teachers, have mentioned is that as long as you are cognizant, as long as you are aware, sometime between Maghrib, the night before, and before Fajr, the day of the fast, that you are going to be fasting that day for the obligation of fulfilling the requirement of the month of Ramadan, then that is your intention. And so, for example, one of our friends slash teachers, the way that he would put it is that uh, the mere fact of you getting up for so and you making sure that you do not eat past Salat al-Fajr, that is your intention. Because why are you doing all of that? You're doing all that. Why? Because you intend to fast. You are trying to fulfill the sunnah of eating sahur, and you're trying to make sure that you stop eating before Fajr so that you don't break your fast before you even began. And so, uh, as long as the person is aware. So when we say an intention, this is the aspect of a person, waking up after Fajr time, during the month of Ramadan, and then all of a sudden, kind of saying to himself, "Oh wait, I'm supposed to be fasting today." We would say that that person does not necessarily have an intention. But again, it's this aspect of knowing that you're going to be fasting for that day and that this fast is an obligation for this year. But if you wish to, take the advice of the ulama in terms of ensuring that uh, that you have the proper intention, then this is an intention that you can make. So now, in continuing with the intention, it is obligatory to make the intention during, as we mentioned, any time between sunset and dawn, meaning that it has to be sometime between Fajr, Maghrib and Fajr. So in Islam, the night comes before the day. So we can make our intention as soon as Maghrib comes in and before Fajr comes in. So what our teacher in Yemen, what he used to do is that after we finish Salatul Maghrib, he would turn around and he would say to everyone that was there, Nawaitu Som. So he would remind us to all make our intention. And so some of the ulama, they mentioned that, you can make your intention as soon as you finish Salatul Maghrib, or you can make your intention as soon as you break your fast. Just making a habit to try to make the intention every day. However, it's uh, also a good practice, as it mentions, to on the first night of the month of Ramadan. So that very first night on the month of Ramadan, that you make the intention to fast the entire month. So this is an opinion based upon Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, that his position was that a person can actually just intend to fast the entire month without having to do it for every day. So the ulama, they mentioned that this is a good practice to have, such that if a person were to forget to make an intention for a particular day, that they've made the intention for the entire month based upon the position of Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala. And whoever forgets to make the intention or sleeps before sunset and does not wake up until after dawn must abstain from the nullifiers during the day and then make it up after Ramadan. So the ulama, they mentioned Now, if this were to be the case, so a person falls asleep before Maghrib, and then they sleep all the way until after Fajr, then that would mean that they did not have an intention for that particular day to come, that they would still need to fast that day, but they would have to make that fast up. And Allah knows best. Now, for supererogatory fast, meaning fasting outside of the month of Ramadan, it is permissible to delay the intention until just before the noon prayer, to just before the dhuhr, provided that one has not already done something that nullifies the fast. So this is from the standpoint of sunnah fast. And so this does not count, for example, for makeup fast. So for example, for a woman, if she's making up a fast from the month of Ramadan because of the time that she may have been on her menstrual cycle during the month of Ramadan, it is not permissible for her to do this because a makeup fast is different from a sunnah fast. So this intention, making an intention after Salatul Fajr but before Salatul Dhuhr, is only in the case of a supererogatory fast. It's not in the case of obligatory fast or the makeup of an obligatory fast. Now, it is permitted to eat, drink, and have intercourse with one's wife after making one's intention until just before true dawn, meaning the second call to prayer. So just as a quick side note, what they mean here by the second call to prayer is that for some of you who may be familiar with this, is that in the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu for Salatul Fajr, they used to have actually two adhans. But actually the first adhan will go off before Fajr actually entered. So sometimes it's referred to as the Tahajjud adhan. And so this is what is being referred to as the second call to prayer, meaning that the second adhan that would be called around Fajr time would be the adhan that signified that Fajr actually had come in. And so such actions do not avoid the intention to fast, meaning that if a person were to be intimate with their spouse, even up to the time just before true dawn, as long as they made the intention to fast, that is not going to affect the validity of their fast. So as it mentions, because it is still valid to intend to fast, even if you're in a state of major ritual impurity, even if you have to make ghusl in a state of janaba, that is permissible to have an intention to fast and then perform the purificatory bath after dawn, although it's better to perform it before dawn. Now, what are the things? Because we said that the fast is made up of two intervals. You have the intention and you have the abstaining from those things that actually break the fast. Now, for many of us, oftentimes we're familiar with the aspect of fasting in which we abstain from food and drink. However, there are other things that can actually be considered to be things that break the fast as well. So the basic one is a substance reaching the body cavity through an open orifice. So this is the concept of eating and drinking, but it goes a little bit further, and particularly, again, according to the Shafi'i school. And so when we say a substance, this excludes mere traces, such as mere taste or smell without any actual substance. We're talking about something that actually has a physicality to it. And so it has to be something that has some type of physicality to it, whether it be a solid or a liquid. And it has to go into an actual body cavity. So we're talking about the hollow areas of the body. So we're talking about the stomach, the throat, the head, the inside of the ear, even going into the anal or the front private part area. And then it has to go through an open orifice like the mouth, the nose, the ear, the anus, or entering or something that has replaced one of them. So for example, if a person has um, uh, if a person were to have um, um, an artificial opening, for example, a person has some type of urinary tract issue, such that they have an artificial opening that has been created for them, then that would take the same ruling as the actual private part itself. So this is what we're talking about. Any substance that is inserted into an open orifice that reaches the body cavity will be something that breaks the fast. So this is the first one. And so generally speaking, this is going to be food and drink, but it can be other things as well. Now, what if a substance enters the body cavity? If one deliberately and willingly allows food, drink, or anything else, even something that is not actually food, into the body cavity through one of the aforementioned orifices, and one knew that this was unlawful, one's fast is nullified. And so, uh, if this if this is the case, then one person's fast will be nullified. However, if this is done forgetfully, under coercion, or in ignorance of its unlawfulness, one's fast is not thereby nullified. So if you forgetfully do something in Ramadan, you forgetfully eat, you forgetfully drink, then this is a situation where this is going to be excused. And the Prophet ﷺ actually mentioned about this specifically, that this is considered to be a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if it's truly forgetfulness, or if it's under coercion, if a person is forced to do it. That, for example, unfortunately, in some of the countries around the world where they're trying to force Muslims not to fast, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them his aid and his mercy, that if you're coerced to break your fast, then this does not nullified, because this is out of force or coercion or in ignorance. That if a person was not aware of certain things, but there, of course, there's going to be a limit to what we consider to be ignorance, meaning that a person can be excused to a certain point. But for example, certain things that are going to be considered to be ma'lum min ad-din bi darura, for example, those things that are necessarily known. So, for example, a person may not have known that entering a suppository into their anal cavity would be a means of breaking the fast, according to the Shafi school, or that a woman inserting a tampon would be a means of breaking the fast, according to the Shafi school. Or, for example, according to a more precautionary position, like inserting a Q-tip into the ear, even though you shouldn't do it anyway, would break the fast, according to the Shafi school. That, these type of things. But for example, generally speaking, you can more or less say that it is ma'lum min ad-din bi darura. It's necessarily known from religion that eating and drinking will break the fast, for example. But if it is out of true ignorance, then that would also be excused. Uh, Can you dye your hair while you're fasting? Yes, dyeing of the hair does not affect the fast in any way, as long as you don't try to eat the dye or something. But I wouldn't recommend doing that anyway. uh, Gums, saliva, and mucus. Someone whose gums bleed must obligatorily wash his mouth thoroughly with water. Spitting it is not sufficient. And the reason why that is because swallowing your saliva doesn't break the fast, as you see on the next point. However, if your gums bleed, what is considered to be the situation is that the blood is now mixed with the saliva. So that is now going to be a foreign substance, because it's generally speaking not common in regards to blood being in the mouth. And so now, even if you spit out, the blood you have, that blood is already mixed with the saliva. So the saliva is now uh it mixed with the blood, so you need to rinse it out before swallowing. And so we just mentioned about the aspect of saliva in the mouth. As long as again, as long as the saliva is not mixed with anything else. And then in terms of mucus and phlegm, so we're talking about things that come from the inside or the outside of the body. So meaning the inside, meaning that is coming from the stomach. That's if phlegm or mucus were to come up to the higher portion of the throat. Generally speaking, for those who are familiar with Arabic, they would say at the exit point of the letter kha in the Arabic alphabet, that if it comes up to that point such that it's not an issue to be able to expel it, meaning that you can easily remove that phlegm, then it becomes an obligation to remove it. Or if it comes from the outer nasal passage, meaning that if it's mucus or phlegm that is coming from the nasal passage that is going down the throat, that it would be an obligation to expel it as well. However, as it mentions, if it inadvertently reaches one body cavity and you're not able to take it out, then the fast is not nullified. Again, this is according to the Shafi school. There are other schools that have difference of opinion in regards to it. However, this is the more precautionary position. So essentially, if you want to give a summation, phlegm or mucus that you can easily remove, then remove it. Phlegm or mucus that is difficult to avoid, then it's very likely that it would be considered to be excused. Now, rinsing of the mouth, as a summation, because I want to make sure that we have enough time to cover everything, plus what we need to cover in terms of the spirituality. So, as a summation with this, is that rinsing of the mouth, if it's done for the purpose of something that the Sharia has legislated, so you're talking about, for example, wudu or a possible sunnah or obligatory ghusl, then as long as a person does not exaggerate when doing it, then that is not going to break the fast. However, if a person does it for other than that, meaning that something that the Sharia has not legislated, then if water reaches the body cavity, whether or not a person exaggerated, then it would break the fast. So the basis of it is that rinsing of the mouth when you're doing it for Sharia reason, for the most part, which is either going to be to remove something from the mouth, like we talked about before, like if a person's gums bleed, or um to make wudu or to make ghusl. Uh, if it's not for one of these, kind of three type of reasons, then whether or not you exaggerate with the water, it will break the fast if water reaches the body cavity. Now, again, if you're the caveat here with the rinse on the mouth with wudu or ghusl or to remove something necessarily from the mouth is that you don't exaggerate. So, for example, if a person gargles with the water, that's considered to be exaggeration. Or if a person takes in a lot of water or switches it around towards the back of the throat, all these type of things. So when you're making wudu or you're making ghusl in the month of Ramadan and you're rinsing the mouth, use a little bit of water and keep it towards the front of the mouth and keep your head pointing down so that if it goes anywhere, it's going to go out of the mouth and not down the throat. And so this is what we mentioned before in regards to ghusl. Just as a side note, a bath, meaning that if I'm taking just a shower for the day, that does not count as a ghusl. So when we talk about ghusl, we're talking about either the obligatory ghusl or uh, the sunnah ghusl. Uh, so this is what we're referring to when we say ghusl, is that it has to be the sunnah ghusl or the obligatory ghusl, not just me taking a bath, to cool down or to clean myself or whatever case may be. So this is something also to keep in mind. And so if you're doing a sunnah ghusl or a obligatory ghusl and water even gets into the ears, then this is not going to break your fast. Again, as long as you didn't do anything to exaggerate it. Now, it's permissible to put Vicks in one's nose or to enter into one's nose a tube that has a scent that one inhales in order to open one's air ducts. As for opening them by inhaling a powder, such as snuff, for example, one's fast is nullified if it reaches the body cavity. So what we're talking about here is that we're talking about, again, things that do not have an actual substance to them. So the thing is that if you insert something like that into your nose to be able to breathe better, as long as it doesn't have an actual substance to it, then that is not necessarily going to break the fast. However, if it has a powder or the like, or even just water, and that reaches to the body cavity, that will break the fast. Nose drops, anal suppositories, and inhalers would break the fast according to the dominant position in the Shafi school. Now, in regards to inhalers, I will mention that there is difference of opinion amongst the schools of law. Some of the schools of law consider that the inhaler does not break the fast. So if a person is a person that normatively uses an inhaler, they can possibly take the position of some of the other schools of law that would say that the inhaler does not necessarily break the fast. But according to the Shafi school, the inhaler does break the fast. So the more precautionary position would be that if one needs to use their inhaler during the month of Ramadan, is that they just make that day up later on after Ramadan is over. So in these type of situations, we're not saying not to use the inhaler. We're just saying that if you need to use it, then you just need to make that day up later on after Ramadan is over. Now, the aspect of eye drops and eardrops is that it's better to avoid them if it's possible. However, there's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars in science as to if the ear is an actual orifice that leads to the body cavity, and also if the eye is open orifice that leads to the body cavity. And so ultimately, what the ulama mentioned is that it's better to avoid putting eardrops or eye drops um, uh, uh, into your ear or your eye during the day of the fast of Ramadan to avoid the difference of opinion. The same thing goes with syringes, with needles. Is that generally speaking, the scholars they have a difference of opinion in regards to whether or not using a syringe would actually break the fast. So if a person is capable of not using it during the day in Ramadan, that is considered to be better. It's considered to be superior because you'll be avoiding difference of opinion. But again, all these things that we are talking about that have to do with medicine, we're not saying to a person to put yourself in harm's way because you want to try to avoid these differences of opinion. If you need to take medicine, if you need to use a syringe, if you need to use a suppository, if you need to use your inhaler, please, please, please use them. You know, if you're, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, the person who's marid, the person who's sick is excused. We're just saying that these are things that would cause for you to just need to make up the day later on. But you're not sinful. And actually, if you want to get technical, you could possibly be considered to be even more sinful for not using medicine if you have the capability of doing so. So again, I don't want anyone to think that, you have to, put yourself in any type of medical harm to try to fulfill the entire day of fasting. Is that if you need to use medications, then, you can use the medication. Just, you may have to make up that day later on. It is permissible, although disliked, to taste food with the edge of one's tongue, provided nothing reaches the body cavity. But if you do taste it, you need to make sure that you thoroughly rinse your mouth out. Generally speaking, the ulama, they say that, one should avoid this unless, for example, like, you're cooking for a large group of people and you need to, just make sure that the food does not have a truly bad taste to it or something like that. Or like, in some of the fiqh books, they mention like if a wife has a very harsh husband who's very particular about his food or something like that, then she can, taste with the tip of the tongue. But again, it would be a situation of just with the tip of the tongue and thoroughly rinsing the mouth out afterwards. Um, According to the Shafi school, smelling food, incense, or flowers does not break the fast. However, it would be better to avoid, in particular, incense because some of the other schools they hold position that incense and other smoke would actually break the fast. Smoking itself, meaning smoking cigarettes or otherwise, would break the fast. Smoking itself is haram, but uh, it would also break one's fast if they were to do it during the day of Ramadan. Secondhand smoke does not break the fast as long as one is not intentionally trying to inhale that secondhand smoke. And other things like street dust, flower chafe, any of these type of things that may come into your face or the like without your intent does not break the fast. Again, only way that these things would break the fast would be like again if you were trying to intentionally take in these things. This is another position that is differed upon. In the Shafi school, it's considered to be anything that is considered to be haram for us as a Muslim is also considered to be haram for us to assist people in, uh, even if they're not Muslim. So, for example, in this particular case, it is haram for us to eat or drink during the day. And so, according to the Shafi school, they consider it to be haram for a person to give even a non-Muslim food or drink during the day. And there's a long fiqh discussion in regards to that. For the sake of time, I'm not necessarily going to go into the details of it, but just know that in the Shafi school, it would be considered to be impermissible to do so. However, in the Hanafi school, for example, they don't necessarily consider this to be haram. So this is not something that there is ijma, there's not a consensus on this matter. But this is something to keep in mind, inshallah. Now, the second nullifier is vomiting. And this is only in the regards to intentional vomiting, meaning that you force yourself to vomit. However, if you get sick and you throw up, that does not affect your fast at all. So just intentional vomiting, that is the nullifier that would actually break the fast. Sexual intercourse. This is another nullifier. This is the third nullifier. Sexual intercourse. And what we mean by sexual intercourse, this is uh, the insertion of the head of the male organ into the female. And so if this happens, this is um, something that would break the fast, and also it's going to be something that's going to require an expiation, and we'll get to that in terms of the expiation. However, one another thing to keep in mind is that if one is having intercourse with one's wife and dawn enters, and one immediately disengages, meaning that as soon as Fajr enters, you cease. You immediately cease the engagement, then the fast will still be considered to be valid. However, if it continues for even a moment after the entrance of dawn, then the fast is considered to be broken. Now, ejaculation caused by masturbation is also a means of breaking up the fast, even if it's done behind a barrier. However, kissing and these type of things, kissing and hugging and these type of things, technically speaking, according to the strong position in the Shafi school, would not break the fast. However, some of the ulama, they say that if kissing and fondling and these type of things lead to pre-ejaculatory fluid exiting, some ulama actually would say that the fast is even broken by that. So it's recommended not to engage in the aspects of kissing and fondling, outside of like just like a peck or something like that. Um, because some of the ulama, they say that even though it may not physically break the fast, it can break the spirit of the fast. And again, this is more or less with lustful kissing. We're not necessarily talking about just like, kissing a spouse goodbye or something like that, but, more or less lustful kissing or fondling. The fifth nullifier is particularly for women, and this is in relation to menstruation or postnatal bleeding. So as soon as menstrual cycle begins or postnatal bleeding begins, this would automatically break the fast, and it is actually an act of worship for a woman to um, cease her fasting. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes a woman may feel like she has the capacity to still fast, or she may still want to fast, but it's actually an act of worship for her not to fast, because again, the aspect of acts of worship is not about the worship in of itself, but it's about fulfilling the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in regards to women is that while they're not on their menstrual or postnatal bleeding cycle, they are to fast. But if they are on their postnatal or menstrual cycle, they are not to fast. And so she is mature, she receives a reward, and she's considered to be in the ibadah, she's considered to be in the worship of her Lord by not fasting, because she's fulfilling the obligation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set forth for her. And so a woman who begins the morning menstruation or postnatal bleeding and then becomes pure during the day is not obliged to abstain from the nullifiers for the rest of the day, although it is recommended for her to do so. And if she begins the morning in a state of purity and then begins menstruation or postnatal bleeding, is nullified, as we mentioned before. The sixth nullifier is insanity. So this goes back to what we mentioned before in terms of those who are obliged to fast. Is that if a person is insane, then the obligation of fasting is lifted from that individual. And so if a person becomes insane during the day of Ramadan, meaning that they started out fasting, but then they went insane, then that fast has been nullified for them. Then the seventh one, whoever is unconscious before dawn and remains unconscious until sunset. So again, part of this aspect is that the attention was not able to be made. His fast for that day is invalid and it's obligatory for him to make it up. But if one is conscious at the beginning of the day and later becomes unconscious, meaning that if one is conscious at dawn and then later becomes unconscious, or if one is unconscious at the beginning of the day and later regains consciousness, during it, even if only for a slight moment, one's fast is valid. This later point is because something you can ask, what is the difference? Is that this later one, meaning that if one is unconscious at the beginning of the day and later regains consciousness, is with the caveat that the person made the intention to fast sometime during that night. But they became unconscious later on, such that they began the day in a state of consciousness and then they became conscious. If someone sleeps all day from dawn until sunset, his fast is valid, even if he does not wake up during the day, as opposed to the one who's unconscious, as mentioned above. And so, again, the sleeping person is in regards to the one that made their intention. It is obligatory to abstain from these nullifiers starting from true dawn. So we're talking about the time that Fajr actually comes in. The moment the Muezzin says the first Allahu Akbar to signify the entrance of the dawn, it becomes unlawful for someone legally responsible to perform a nullifier. If there is food or drink in his mouth, it is obligatory for him to spit it out. Some of the alerted continue to eat and drink until the end of the adhan, and this is a grave mistake that nullifies the fast. Whoever does one of these nullifiers forgetfully under coercion or in ignorance of its unlawfulness has his fast is not nullified, although ignorance of the rulings of the sacred law is not an excuse for someone who has access to scholars and muftis. That's what we mentioned before, is that there is a fine line as to where we're going to draw the line in terms of ignorance. So this is not just a default aspect of ignorance, is that if you have the capacity to learn and you don't, that is not necessarily going to be considered to be an excuse. So inshallah, everyone here will not fall into that category. What if you nullify your fast without excuse? Whoever ostensibly muta'addiyan nullifies his fast through eating, drinking, or another nullifier without excuse is sinful and is obligatory for him to abstain for the remainder of the day. So that's you would be sinful for having done so, and you would still need to maintain the fast for the rest of the day, and then you must make up the day in place of the one that is nullified, provided it did not happen through intercourse. So according to the Shafi school, if you break your fast unlawfully, meaning without excuse, for anything other than intercourse, you're sinful, so you need to make tawbah. You need to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you need to remain fasting for the rest of the day. And then you need to make up that fast after Ramadan is over. But that is to the extent, more or less, that you would have to do it. However, if you broke your fast unlawfully by way of intercourse, then in that type of situation, it is obligatory for you to perform an expiation, as will be explained later on. Whoever eats, drinks, or has intercourse thinking it merely probable that the sun has set without attaining confidence that it actually has set must obligatory make up that day.
Whoever eats, drinks, or has intercourse thinking it probable that it is still nighttime, and it subsequently learns that dawn has entered, his fast is nullified, and he must abstain from the nullifiers of the fast for the rest of the day and make up the missed fast. If he does not come to learn that dawn had actually entered, his fast remains valid. So the whole basis of it here is that we do things based upon yaqeen. So this is, a fine point to keep in mind as well, is that we know that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu he mentioned that the fasting person should hasten, they should rush to break the fast when the time for breaking of the fast comes. But the ulama, they mention about this recommendation of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu that this rushing is based upon a person knowing, you did that on purpose, did this rushing is based upon a person knowing for certain that the time for Maghrib has come in, for example. So that if I'm fasting and it's time for the breaking of the fast, I should rush to break my fast only once I'm certain that Maghrib has come in. And so this is the rushing that we're talking about. And so one should be very cautious about this. Now, speaking of this aspect of eating and breaking of the fast and so on and so forth, there are some recommended measures that one should take when they're fasting. So the suhoor, the pre-dawn meal, this is a recommended meal that one should not miss as much as possible, even if it just be that one takes a sip of water. That's the Prophet ﷺ mentioned that there's great blessing, there's great barakah in this. So a person should do their best to not miss it. But also keep in mind that you should not make it something that is a very heavy situation, meaning that, and you want to eat something that is ideally nutrient dense, meaning something that is very nutritional, but not very heavy. So this can be a different foods can be utilized for this, but I wouldn't recommend having pancakes and eggs and sausage and all this for your sahur meal. Iftar, as we just mentioned, the breaking of the fast is referred to as iftar, and to hasten it to break the fast is a recommendation that you should hasten, but as we mentioned before, only once you know that the time has come in. And it's sunnah, is considered to be recommended that you break it with moist dates. And if you're unable to do that, then with dry dates. And if you're unable to do that, then with water. And if you're unable to do that, then something sweet like raisins or other types of fruits or the like. But to break others, but essentially, these are the recommended things to break the fast with. But you should break your fast with something. But again, the dates are the best thing to do, and dates and water will be good. And then to help others to break their fast is also considered to be very rewarding thing that one can do to provide for others to be able to break their fast. And yeah, smoothies can work, and oats are, I would probably say oats will probably be on the top of my list of good things
For suhoor.
for suhoor. Now, other things that people should keep in mind is that even though these things are not things that necessarily break the physical aspects of the fast, they should keep in mind that any type of sinful activity, whether it be vulgar speech, whether it be watching or listening to things that are of no benefit, all these things will take away from the fast. And we'll talk about this, inshallah, when we come to the second portion of this night. But these are things that we want to avoid as much as possible. To give in charity is also encouraged. We're not necessarily talking about zakat specifically here, but we'll come to that inshallah. But to give in charity in general, meaning sadaqah, is also recommended. to do as much worship as one can, as one possibly can. Is that if we, as much as we can spend the entire day in acts of ibadah, that is what we want to do. And so that can include the recitation of Quran, doing different acts of dhikr, learning sacred knowledge, all these type of things. To keep up our relationships with our families, and if we have severed relationships with our families, to try to mend them during this month of Ramadan. And also, if we are going out to the group prayer, and particularly Salatul Isha and Salatul Tariq, that to take a ghusl every night before going. And so this is a warning from our teacher, Sheikh Amjad, in particular the ask, breaking the fast on those things that are unlawful. So breaking the fast on smoking or, anything like that, is that, you want to be mindful of the fact that you can be completely nullifying your fast because of breaking it on that which is unlawful. Now, what are some of the things that would actually keep a person from not necessarily being having to fast? So, sickness, as we alluded to before, is one of the major things that will keep someone from being able to fast. And so, when we say sickness, we're talking about something that causes extreme hardship. And so this is going to be the aspect of a loss of a limb, the loss of a life, a worsening of a sickness, or prolonging the healing from a sickness. So if one begins the day fasting and later becomes sick in the manner described above, it's permissible to break one's fast. Also, having a long trip, meaning a trip, and he uses kilometers here, but it translates to about 50 miles. So 50 miles from one city limits. So this is not 50 miles from your home. This is 50 miles from your city limits. So wherever the limit of your city is, if your journey is going to be 50 miles or more from that point, then it would be excused for that person to not fast if they left before Fajr. So meaning that if you're going to be traveling, but you leave after Fajr has come in, then you're still obliged to fulfill that fast. But if you've left before Fajr, then if you're going to be traveling, then it would be permissible for you to break the fast. However, it's not required that you break your fast for traveling. Pregnancy or nursing, when the woman fears for herself or her child, is also an excuse for breaking of the fast. However, just the mere fact that a woman is pregnant or nursing does not exempt her from fasting. This is only the case if a woman fears for herself or her child that fasting is going to cause harm to one or both of them, then she would be excused from fasting. But again, this is only if there's fear that there's going to be harm to one or both of them. Continue. Uh, uh, did you mention that it's better not to inhale incense due to smoke? Can one inhale an essential oil like rosemary, lavender? Yeah, I was mentioning that according to the Maliki school, they consider that smoke from like incense and the like is something that would actually break the fast. So I was mentioning that it would be better to avoid it, just to avoid the difference of opinion. And Allah knows best. Now, all missed fasts must obligatorily be made up later on, regardless of whether they were missed with a valid excuse, such as sickness or travel, or without an excuse. However, the following are not obliged to make up their missed fasts. A child when he reaches puberty, meaning that all the fasts that a child does not fast because he's a child or she's a child, they do not have to make up once they reach puberty. And the same person when he regains sanity. So if a person was insane the pin is lifted from the individual, so they are not of those who are going to have to make up their fast. Um, an original non-Muslim when he accepts Islam. So a non-Muslim does not have to make up for all those years of not fasting. An old person who is unable to fast, meaning that the basis of it is that if a person is not fasting because of of being elder, then that person is never going to get younger. So they're not going to have to make up the fast. Someone who's continuously sick, so a person with a chronic illness such that they'll never be able to fast, then they also are not going to be required to fast. You need to make up the fast. Now, if while fasting a child reaches puberty, a traveler ceases to travel, or a sick person recovers, it is obligatory for them to complete their fast. If they were not fasting, it is recommended for them to abstain from the nullifiers for the remainder of the day. So this is just, a basic aspect. Now, there are some people who would need to pay a fidya due to not being able to pray, and we're going to talk about those details now. So, a payment fidya is due from four types of individuals: an old person who's unable to fast, or someone continuously ill. So, basically, anyone who is never going to be able to fast, whether that be due to illness, whether that be due to old age, that if they are never going to be able to fast, then they will pay this fidya. And so this fidya is basically a mud, which is about 275 grams of food from the main staple of the area. So we're talking about like rice, wheat, barley, and these type of things. And they would give this to one of the eligible people that can receive zakat for every day of the fast. So this is for the person who is not able to fast and they're not going to be able to make up their fast. So they would give a fidya for every day of the fast. Now, the strong position in the Shafi school is that it has to be in these foodstuffs. However, other scholars say that it can actually be the monetary value of that. So that can also be acted upon as well. The third category of people is whoever delays making up missed fast until the following Ramadan without being excused in this delay, a fidya is due for every year. So if a person delays making up their fast, so say, for example, a person had fast that they needed to make up for from 2023, for example, and they haven't made up those fasts, and now we're about to begin the Ramadan of 2024, then that person would need to pay a fidya for that for not making up that fast prior to this upcoming Ramadan. So every year that you miss, you'd have to pay a fidya. And the pregnant or nursing woman who doesn't fast solely for the concern of her child, meaning that she doesn't fear any harm for herself, but she fears harm for her child. If that is the case, then she also pays a fidya. She's not sinful, but she needs to pay a fidya as well as making up that day. And so this is just the case of a woman who is either pregnant or nursing, who breaks her fast for the sake of her child. She's not sinful. It's just to say that she would need to make up the fast as well as pay the fidya. Now, we talked before about the aspect of sexual intercourse. So this is what we are going to talk about now in terms of what is the ruling for the person that engages in it. So the person that engages in sexual intercourse unlawfully during the day of Ramadan, they have to make up that day, as we mentioned before. However, they are also would have to do a kafara. And so expiation is only due on someone who deliberately and willingly has intercourse during the day of Ramadan in full knowledge of its unlawfulness when he has not already nullified that day's fast by eating or drinking. And so this is another caveat in the Shafi madhab, is that if you've already broken your fast by something else, then if you were to have intercourse, then this ruling would not necessarily apply to you, because the breaking of your fast was not actually by the intercourse, it was by something else prior to that. As for the one who merely touches his wife without actual intercourse, or has intercourse not remembering that he was fasting, or under coercion, or out of ignorance of his unlawfulness, or has already nullified his fast before intercourse by eating or drinking, he does not need to perform expiation. So these are some of the caveats in relation to this. Um, According to the Shafi school, an essential oil would not break the fast. I'm not 100% sure in regards to the Maliki school. I know the smoke that you get from incense would, but in terms of essential oils, I'm not 100% sure. Um, uh, it would be something that you would want to ask someone in the Maliki school of that's uh, versed in the Maliki school of law as to whether that would break the fast or not. But according to the Shafi school, that would not, because even the aspect of incense itself would not break the fast in the Shafi school. However, we were just mentioning that with incense, in terms of the smoke, it's better to avoid it because it is necessarily known in the Maliki school that the smoke from incense would break it. But in terms of essential oils, I don't know 100%. Now, in regards to the expiation, the kafara for having broken one's fast by sexual intercourse unlawfully, then the expiation for one is only obligatory for the husband. It is not obligatory for the wife. And an expiation is due for every day of Ramadan that one nullifies due to intercourse. And the way that it is done is that it has to be in this order. That you would either free a slave, which for most of us is not going to be practical, or then you will fast 2 consecutive months. And when we say 2 consecutive months, then that is talking about 60 days back to back, meaning that if I were fasting for 58 days consecutively, and then on day 59, something happened, I couldn't fast, I'd have to start all the way back from day one. It has to be 60 days without break. And if one is not capable of doing that, meaning that if that is going to be too hard on someone, then one must feed 60 people who are short of money. And when we say the aspect of fasting 2 consecutive months being hard on one, we're not saying that, you just don't want to do it. Obviously, generally speaking, a person wouldn't want to do it. But we're saying that if you're not able to do that, mean like you're physically unable to do that. So like it's going to cause you some type of physical medical condition. If it's just an inconvenience, then that's not what we're talking about. And again, if you're not able to do that, then you will feed 60 poor people who are considered to be of the miskin. Um, uh, uh, and this again will go to the aspect of the mud, which is about 275 grams of food from the main staple of the area. So the the short end of the story is don't have sexual intercourse during the day in Ramadan. If one breaks 60-day fast due to illness, can they continue the expiation fast once they get better, or they have to start over? Yeah, it doesn't matter what the situation is, whether it's from illness or whatever the case may be. If you're not able to do it consecutively, you have to start all over from day one. So that's why I said the best thing is just not uh to do it. But if one does have to do it, then again, it has to be consecutively. Like if one does have to do it, my suggestion would be to do it in December and January, or January and February, because that would be the most practical in regards to being able to do it in a fairly easier situation, or actually probably November to December. Basically, I would say try to do it anywhere between November and February, because those are when the days are the shortest, and so it won't be as difficult. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his help and his assistance. And so this is a warning that Sheikh Amjad is giving to newlyweds, uh, is that, essentially don't give in to your lust. The Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's not asked us for much. And so
Don't just say, well, I'll just do the expiation and I just really want to, be intimate with my spouse. Don't, you know, because it's not just about the aspect of, being able to make it up or to do the expiation or whatever the case may be, but you're sinning against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that is a major thing, and you don't know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may do with you in relation to that. So, are there any other questions that we haven't necessarily covered during this? I know I kind of went through it fast, but again, I just wanted to make because, I could have literally spent the entire time just, you know, going over this in greater detail. But I wanted to make sure that we had time for the questions and also time for the other aspect of the fast, which is the spiritual aspect of the fast. Asrih, I see your hand is up.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam wa barakatuh.
Just forgot my question. Oh, can you speak to ways that uh it's possible to use certain foods or certain techniques to manage nausea because of I previously experienced nausea while fasting, so I just welcome your reflections on how we can use diet to manage nausea. Or like if there are certain foods or
Hmm.
sunnah certain sunnah practices of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that can be used to manage nausea or to prevent nausea.
So the thing is that I don't know. And part of it is because the thing with nausea is that people have nausea for different reasons. Um, so, some people they have certain stomach conditions that will cause them to have nauseousness. Some people, yes, the fasting in of itself may give them certain stomach reactions. So it's a situation where different people are going to have different responses. My suggestion in general, probably just to try to eat healthy, nutrient dense foods, like we mentioned before, um, so that you're giving your body good sustenance to feed off during the day. Um, and also try to make sure that during the night when you're able to eat and drink, to keep yourself hydrated, because some people they experience nauseousness from a lack of hydration. So try to make sure that you keep yourself hydrated. Now, when I say hydrated, I don't mean by sugary drinks and these type of things, but primarily water. Water and possibly some milk, but milk in particular can also cause people to have stomach issues. So water is what I'm primarily would recommend, but really just trying to be in a situation where you are trying to eat healthy and also don't eat too much. So I would also say stay away from fried foods as much as possible because that can also cause nauseousness and so on and so forth. So again, eating healthy, like if you can primarily make up your suhoor and your iftar to be primarily vegetable matter and complex carbohydrates, um, uh, and, these will help you inshallah a little bit more. But
And
it could be a situation where someone may need kind of professional assistance if it's a situation where there's actually a medical condition that's causing the nauseousness.
and then just quickly, are there any specific sunnah practices? Can you go over any specific sunnah practices related to the amount of water? Because I noticed that drinking water the night prior, the following day is just like you're just like constantly passing water through your system because I obviously the amount was over like whatever it should have been. So could you go over any sunnah practices regarding water, the amount of water that you're supposed to drink, and then can you go over any sunnah practices with relation to exercising, like pursuing sports while you're fasting, like any specific sunnah practices that are related to exercise and sports
So in
during
regard
fat while fasting?
So in regards to the amount, I've never come across any specific amount in regards to it, but the Prophet ﷺ in general for food and in general, he's always, told us to be in a sense of moderation. So when I say keep yourself hydrated, It's not to say that you have to like down a gallon of water at night, but making sure that you are taking in, water. Generally speaking, as my doctor would actually say, is that you can essentially use your, and I'm saying this from the medical perspective. I'm not trying to be gross or anything of that nature, but you can use your urine as a gauge. Is that if your urine is dark in color, or if you're having issues urinating, that's your body telling you that you're not, receiving enough liquid. So you want your urine more or less to be light to even clear in color. So different people are going to have different capacities. So, you can use that to more or less gauge it. Now, in relation to like some of the aspects of the sunnah or the like in regards to exercise, I haven't necessarily come across anything specifically from the Prophet Muhammad SAW in regards to exercise during fasting. However, one of my teachers, his recommendation is that approximately about an hour or so before Maghrib, an hour or so before you break your fast, to do some type of exercise. Not necessarily a heavily extensive exercise, but do something to kind of get the blood flowing. And he's mentioned that there's been great benefit that has been found in doing that, and Allah knows best. Is it recommended that my 10 and 8-year-old fast if they have not yet reached puberty? Is it bravery if I don't make them fast? What is the position in the Hanafi school? I'm in a transitional period of my life where just fasting on my own is difficult and requires a lot of effort. No, it's recommended to allow for the children to fast, however old they are, um, even if they only fast a portion of the day. So if they can fast a whole day, great. But even if they can only fast a portion of the day, because again, you want them to get to a situation where fasting is something that is normal, and fasting is something that they even can take enjoyment in. And so there's no issue with having your children fast. It's just to say that it's not an obligation for them until they actually reach puberty. Can one do expiation fast for the missed fast in the past 60 days in a row, or one has to go back and count how many fasts they missed to make them up? So the aspect of fasting 60 days in a row is, for one, is only if the fast was broken by intercourse, at least according to the Shafi school. So if a person broke their fast previously and it was not based upon intercourse, then in the Shafi school, they would not need to fast 60 days. They would just need to make those days up. And then also, they would need to pay a fidya for the years that went by that they didn't make it up before the next coming Ramadan. So it's only in the case of the person that broke their fast based upon intercourse that they would need to fast the 60 days. What if you start to feel weak? So if a person starts to feel weak, this just depends on the situation. If it's something that is, truly a detriment to your health, then that could be a permissible reason for one to break the fast. However, if it's just like a general weakness that, most people may feel due to fasting, then, you may, try to sit down, or, maybe try to lie down if you're able to. But you would really have to look at the situation that is, if essentially what you look at is that, is this situation that I'm going through something that a normal person would not be able to bear? Like the average person, would they not be able to bear this? If that's the case, then that can be an excuse for you to break the fast. But if it's not the case, meaning that this is something that the average person could bear, then it would be a situation of just trying to find something that you can do to assist you until you're able to break the fast. And then again, trying to make adjustments to, the things that you eat, and so on and so forth, to try to make it that it becomes easier. I mean, in general, especially if it's a person's first time fasting, is that in general for people, those first 10 days of the fast are usually the most difficult. And yes, for many people, they may get a headache. They may have different stomach situations that they're going through. But
These are not necessarily going to be reasons to break the fast, because the body is an amazing thing, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's given the body a means to be able to kind of heal itself and to adjust itself as things as we progress. And so it just really is going to be an individual basis as to what is the exact situation for this person. Do you have to pay fidya once because of missed pregnancy / nursing fasting, or until you make up all the days? I'm not 100% sure for the Hanafi school specifically. If you are looking specifically for the Hanafi school ruling, then I would say if you email the Mecca Center, then inshallah either Ustadh Murad or Imam Kamal, they are much more versed in the Hanafi school than I am. Then they would be more knowledgeable in regards to that, in regards to the Hanafi school. Yeah, yogurt is a great yogurt has a lot of probiotics. It has a hydrating factor to it because of the because the reason why I mentioned milk before as well is that scientifically they've looked at it, and even the Prophet Muhammad SAW mentioned, he praised milk, that milk actually quenches the thirst. It actually hydrates better than water does. However, some people, they have adverse reactions to, for example, whole milk or lactose milk that has not had the lactose removed from it. But yogurt is also a very good thing to good food to eat. Can you use eye drops for medical requirements during fasting? So again, the aspect of eye drops, there's a difference of opinion on it. One of my teachers, Sheikh Khalil Abdul Rashid, he mentioned that, if you use eye drops, there are scholars who would say that it would not break the fast. But if you use an eye drop and then you can actually taste the saline of the eye drop in the back of your throat, then that would break the fast. So again, it's a situation that if you can avoid using it during the day, during the fast, it'll be better. But there is a difference of opinion in regards to it. Workout before suhoor, the time frame after Maghrib, leading up to Isha Tarawih prayers. Yeah, one of my teachers, he advises the latter, working out prior to Maghrib. Yeah, ginger tea is usually good for nausea. However, the thing is that if you're already fasting during the day, you're not necessarily going to be able to take it then. But ginger tea is also, and also vitamin B is also good for nausea as well. But again, that is going to go into more or less, people's individual stomach makeup, which is going to vary from person to person. Yeah, headaches from hunger, that is usually common. Again, the best thing that I can say is, again, trying to eat healthy foods during the day of fasting. Excuse me, during the night of fasting. So making your iftar and your suhoor healthy foods that are nutrient dense. They are highly nutritional. And trying to avoid the gluttonous foods, the foods that, our eyes love, but our stomachs hate. Try to do the opposite. Get the foods that your stomach loves and your eyes hate, so to speak. So that's why I said, vegetables, complex carbohydrates, yogurts. So when I say complex carbohydrates, I'm talking about things like oatmeal. I wouldn't even necessarily say bread too much, especially wheat flour bread. I wouldn't recommend that. Also, protein rich things, uh, depending on how your medical makeup is, different type of meats, but quality cut meats. I'm not talking about like fried chicken or these type of things, but like, if you have a big chicken or something like that. Uh, so, but again, looking for quality nutrient dense foods and not the, you know, lustful based foods. So I would say avoid fried foods altogether, avoid sugary foods. Yes, thank you. I forgot, watermelon and cucumbers. Uh, these are actually foods that the Prophet ﷺ used to like to eat. Watermelon, cucumbers, dates, um, uh, watermelon, cucumbers, dates, um, uh, I'm trying to think of some of the other, uh, uh, even barley bread. The Prophet ﷺ used to eat barley bread. Um, but again, these are more nutrient rich, nutrient dense foods that a person can eat. If you want, do I have it up here? Yes, I do. If you want, some of the things, that I know in regards to food and some of the benefits can be found in this book, Food Between Cure and Curse, or Curse and Cure. This is a book written by a Muslim physician's assistant, as well as a great wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a great friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Abdul Munir. Um, and so it goes into a lot of aspects of food in terms of what is actually good for you and what is not. And of course, because this is coming from um, uh, two individuals who are very much Muslim, it also incorporates the aspects of the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So if a person wants to get this book, I mean, I know you're not going to be able to get it before Ramadan starts, but this is also so. But what I'm saying is that this book can give you a basis of what I mean by, like, nutrient dense foods, and also some of the foods to avoid that will actually cause you to have an increase in some of the difficulties that one may face when fasting. Right. So inshallah, we will kind of switch gears. So we've been talking about the fiqh and also some of the practical aspects of trying to make the fast a little bit easier. Okay. One more question on YouTube. What is the schedule for paying the fidya if you are an elder person? Can you pay for the whole month in the beginning of Ramadan uh, on day to day or day to day? So if it's going to be a situation where a person knows that they're in this category of people who are never going to be able to fast, if I'm not mistaken, you can pay it all in advance. So many of the masajid, they will mention sometimes exactly what the amount of the fidya is, and you can give that to them. But you have to specify what because the aspect of the fidya, that this is an act of worship, is that the person is not going to be fasting, and so instead of fasting, they're giving this fidya, and so this is an act of worship. So you have to ensure that you specify what your intention is for. And like I said, some masajids, they will have specific collection for people who are trying to pay fidya and so on and so forth. And so they will collect it and they will distribute it for you on your behalf.
And so that would probably be one of the easiest ways of doing it. There are some online sources, but I would say if you're going to use an online source, you just want to, vet it properly, meaning that you want to make sure that they are an established quality organization who knows the sacred law. Basically you want someone that is deemed to be trustworthy in regards to distributing uh, uh, fidya. I'm trying to think. I'm just trying to quickly see if I can find one where I know the organization and could recommend it, myself. Because I just can't think of any. Like I know, like some of the local masajids here in New Jersey do, but not everyone of you is going to be in New Jersey. So I'm just trying to see if I see anyone online quickly, or even if Sister Tahmina, if you know of any ones that, yeah, I mean, Islamic Relief, I believe takes fidya. Uh, so, even online, there are different organizations that will take fidya. So these are all possible options. But again, you can also just go to your local masjid because it's actually considered to be better to any time that you have to pay zakat or any type of sadaqah to give to the people in your locality before branching out to other areas. Like, sorry, I was just looking to see if I had the book I'll be referencing readily available to me, which I don't. So, uh, but it's okay. So, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair. So inshallah, so now we're going to be looking at the aspect of, trying to perfect spiritually the aspect of Ramadan. So not just the aspect of, because everything that we've more or less been talking about now has been the aspect of the practical kind of outward, the zahir aspect of fasting. But as Imam Ghazali has in his work, he actually has a book, and that was the book I was trying to see if I had right next to me, but I don't. But Imam Ghazali, he has a book called The Inner Dimensions of Islamic Worship, which is basically a section from his Ihya al-Ulumuddin, but it's been translated as a just one book, and it's not a long book; it's a relatively short book. Um, uh, Again, it's translated as the Inner Dimensions of Islamic Worship, where he essentially what he mentions is that every act of worship has its lahir and its batin. It has its outward and its inward. So the lahir in terms of fiqh, in terms of acts of worship, is the what we just talked about. So, for example, with the fast, that's the making the intention, abstaining from the nullifiers, and so on and so forth. But the batin, that is the aspect of what am I doing internally in order to reap the benefit of the fast? Because what is the purpose of the fast? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran very clearly, كتب عليكم after أعوذ من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم كتب عليكم الصيام كما كتب على الذين من قبلكم لعلكم تتقون. That fasting has been prescribed upon you as it's been prescribed upon those before you in order that you may gain in taqwa. So the whole point of the fast is that we gain in closeness and nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the purpose of our fast. This is why my teacher, he used to always remind us before the Eid would come. He used to remind us of a line of poetry. And so the line of poetry says, Al Eid
ليس لمن يلبس جديد العيد لمن تعته يزيد. That the Eid, the celebration at the end of Ramadan, and also we have the Eid that is associated with the Hajj. But in any case, the Eid is not for the one who wears new clothes. Al-Eid ليس لمن يلبس جديد. It's not for the one that wears new clothes, because one of the sunnahs of Eid is that you put on your best, or if you have it, new clothing. But the line of poetry reminding us that that is not the purpose of the Eid. Al-Eid liman ta'atuhu yazid. The Eid actually is for the person who increases in their obedience to Allah. That is who is the Eid is for. That is what we're celebrating. We're celebrating that our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has become closer, it has become better, has become stronger. And so how do we accomplish this? Well, one of the primary aspects, Imam Ghazali, he breaks down the fast into three categories. He says that the fast for the ordinary person, the awam, the ordinary person, is that they do what we just mentioned. They make the intention and they abstain from the nullifiers. That's it. That is the fast of the ordinary worshiper. However, he says that there's another level that's higher than that. And so he says that the fast of the elite is that they fast from all those things that are displeasing or disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They fast from the haram and the makruh. So not only are they fulfilling the physical requirements of the fast, but they're also fasting, they're also refraining from those things that are displeasing or disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he mentions that there's a fast that's even higher than that. That's the third level of fasting, is that a person fasts from everything other than Allah. Now, the thing is that, there are different ways that we can look at this, but primarily what I'm going to focus on is the second category, because for most of us, that will probably take us a lifetime to master. But this aspect of not just fasting from, the food and drink and the intercourse and the vomiting and so on and so forth, but also the aspect of fasting from all those things that are displeasing or disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In our times today, I'm more or less going to sum it up in this, is that for us to try to take advantage of the spiritual aspect of Ramadan, I would say we need to get rid of the small screen. Now, I'm probably going to get in trouble because, some of you already know that the Mecca Center, we have our Ramadan program that will be going on during the month, where pretty much every day we're going to be having some type of Ramadan special going on that's going to be either on Zoom or YouTube or Facebook, whatever case may be. But I'm honestly saying is that if you can completely unplug, like just completely, be away from your devices, ahlan wa sahlan marhaban, please do so. And the reason why I'm saying that is because even with, us, for example, the Mecca Center and many other, places, are doing it, is that the thing is that with all the benefit that you may experience using these devices that we have, there's also much harm that comes to it. Like there's actual physical harm that comes from it. Like for example, some of you may have noticed that I have an Apple Watch on. But the thing is that what you can't necessarily notice is that my Apple Watch is actually not actually on. I mean, if I were to try to show it to you here, is that you can see that there's an X right here because I keep it on airplane mode. Why? Because the radiation that comes from the watch, as well as that what comes from your phone and so on and so forth, actually, has different physical effects that can have on the body. And so my Apple Watch is not even, you wouldn't even necessarily say it's truly a smartwatch at this point. It's more or less like a dumb watch. But I don't even wear it often. Like this is the first time I've worn it in months at this point. But so there's actual physical harm that comes with all the devices that we have. But even more so than that, what I would focus more on is also the spiritual harm that comes from our devices. Is that all the advertisement, all the haram things that come about on these devices and so on and so forth, is that, I can say like, yes, I'm going to go and I'm going to go listen to Ustadh Murad on, at the Mecca Center and so on and so forth. But before I get there, I open up my email so I can get to the link, and I'm seeing this ad for, something that I don't even necessarily want, but they're making it look so good that I, want to see what it's about. Or, I click on, my email, and then all of a sudden, I have, this image of a woman if I'm a man, or a man if I'm a woman, um, that is attractive to me. And now I'm, I have that image, and then I'm struggling myself to make sure that I'm not looking, or I'm just looking and not even paying attention to it, and so on. So what I'm saying is that these devices have become so ingrained in us that it actually is taking away from our ability to fully engage with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is that, if it's not in 180 characters or less, whatever, X or Twitter or whatever it is, requires for you to do it in, or whatever case may be, or if it's not in a 10-minute video or less, like, I can't even engage it. And so my recommendation for all of us from the standpoint of the spiritual aspect is to, as much as possible, like, look, if you're going to come and be with us at the Mecca Center, alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala place barakah in it, for you. But what I would say is, make it a situation where that is the only thing that you're going to be doing, that you streamline it essentially, that I know there's a way that you can set up a continuous meeting that's going to continue. So I would say do that. Set it up so that you can just go straight to the meeting, so that you can avoid all those distractions. Because the thing is that we don't necessarily pay attention to it, but all those images that we see, all those things that we hear, like, and I'm talking about music at this point in time as well, is that all those things, they're like little poison arrows to our hearts. And the thing is that the more that we allow for those poison arrows to come to our hearts, the more desensitized we become to it. And the more desensitized that we become to it, the harder it is for our hearts to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because our hearts are filled with so much of this dunya. And so again, my advice, and I'm saying all this for myself. I'm the one, like, maybe not all of you are better than me. You probably are better than me. But I'm saying this primarily to myself, is that, one of the things that I plan to do, for myself during this Ramadan, is to do my best to unplug, generally speaking. I have two things that I plan to use the internet for this Ramadan. One is something that one of my teachers is doing, and I plan to make it a streamline while I'm just going to that. And two is the Mecca Center. That's the only two things that I'm planning on doing. So no YouTube, no Facebook, any of you who know me in any type of way know that, if you know that I even have a Facebook account, which I do, I haven't posted on that thing in probably over a year or something like that. I don't even know the last time I posted anything on that thing. Uh, and so I'm not even really all that big on that. But like, but no YouTube, no, I don't even have Twitter, and like Twitter's X'd out on my phone at this point because I don't really use it or whatever. I don't have an Instagram account, but anyway, you get the point, is that this aspect of trying to unplug. And definitely if you have a television, I would say give yourself a challenge. See if you can unplug it and not plug it in until at least after Ramadan. And even after Ramadan, I wouldn't necessarily suggest to plug it back in, but see if you can take the television and unplug it. And if you are a person that listens to music, then unplug from the music. And every time that you get the urge to listen to music, listen to the Quran. And if you're a person that doesn't listen to music, in terms of, when I say music, I'm talking about like popular cultural music. And if you're a person that doesn't listen to popular cultural music, but you still listen to like nasheeds and these type of things, same thing. Every time that you get the urge to listen to a nasheed or even a qasida, instead of listening to the nasheed or the qasida, listen to the Quran. Because even from the standpoint of the ulama who will say that, listening to a nasheed or a qasida, that there's nothing wrong with it, and in some situations can be praiseworthy, they always put a caveat to that. And that caveat is that you should never come to a point where you have a preference towards a nasheed or a qasida more than you have a preference towards the Quran. Meaning that if it comes to a situation where, for example, I'm sitting around, and I hate to use this concept, I love what I've heard one of our teachers mention before when he says that, time is not something you kill, time is something you give life to. So, but let's just say that you have some time on your hands. If you're debating, like, should I listen to Jay-Z or should I listen to Zayn Bika or should I listen to the Quran? If your inclination doesn't automatically draw you towards the Quran in preference to all those other possibilities, then that is letting you know that your heart has not truly connected to where it's supposed to be. Because as some of the ulama of tasawwuf, some of the ulama of tazkiyah, some of the ulama of purification of the heart, they mention about the person that considers themselves to be a person on the spiritual path, a person that is trying to get closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the things they mention is that they say that if you cannot find everything that you need in the Quran, you have not truly become a spiritual wayfarer. You have not truly embarked on the spiritual path. That the person on the spiritual path should be able to find everything that they need within the Quran. That you should have a intimate relationship with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Ramadan is just that. Shahr al-Quran is the month of the Quran. And so going back to this aspect of what Imam Ghazali talks about in terms of these three different categories of individuals who fast, is that I would say that for many of us, one of the primary gates to us engaging uh, in us engaging in terms of ma'asi, in terms of disobedience or displeasing behavior, has to do with the small device. Whether it be that I'm calling so-and-so to arrange to go and do something haram, or I'm texting so-and-so to do that, or I'm looking at this YouTube feed that, gives me such and such and such and such and so on and so forth. Is that for many of us, our haram in our times today start with the small devices, start with social media. And I would definitely say to get rid of the social media. If you want to see the detriment of social media, you can read the book from Leonard Sachs called um he has different books that he writes, but there's one that he wrote specifically about girls. Um لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. Girls on the Edge. That's what it is. Thank you. Girls on the Edge. If you want to, because one of the things that he mentions in that book in regards to girls and social media in particular, and it's not just that it's going to be girls, but he's a medical doctor and he's done research on this. And part of his research that he's seen from the detriments of social media is that, in particular for girls, is that it leads to greater aspects of depression and anxiety, in particular because on social media, what happens for young girls more than it happens for boys is that girls, generally speaking, when they post on social media, they're always posting the most positive things in their life. So they're posting about the vacation that they just took with their parents. They're posting about the new bike that that they just received. They're posting about this great grade that they just got on their homework assignment and so on and so forth. They're posting about all the positive things. And so when another young girl looks at her friends and all their posts, and she has all these different hardships and, you know, and difficulties happening in her life, and she's seeing that her friends seem to be having all this great fun. They just went on vacation. They just got this new bike. They just got a new baby brother, and so on and so forth. And now she's dealing with, you know, uh, her father just got laid off, or she may have an abusive parent in the household, or she's dealing with whatever. And this leads her to feel like, you know, she is, you know, just having a miserable life and everyone else around her is having fun. And so this actually is, you know, assisting in depression and anxiety. And the thing is, what she's not seeing is that that same friend that she has that's posting about the vacation and so on and so forth, she has all these other different issues that she's going through, but she's just not posting about it. And so this is part of the aspect of what he is discussing in Girls on the Edge is, you know, um uh this aspect of you know, social media leading to depression, because we're seeing all these people thinking that they're living all these great lives, and that our lives are just horrible because we're not having as much fun as they are, where we don't actually know all the details that are going on in their lives, because they're just, and the reason why he focuses on girls and not boys is because boys on social media are more likely to post, like, for example, like he gave the example, because I've seen him do a presentation in person. He gave the examples like, you know, a girl is not necessarily going to post, you know, when she lost her puppy or her cat or something like that, whereas a boy might do that, or a girl is not going to post about her, you know, being sick or something like that, and, you know, constantly vomiting, where a boy might, you know, not only post about him being sick, but he'll show you the vomit that he, you know, that he just threw up, or whatever the case may be. I mean, I'm not trying to be, you know, gross about it, but it's just the aspect that, you know, boys are more willing to show kind of like the good and the bad, whereas girls are not as inclined to show the bad, and more or less we're going to focus on the good. But in any case, I don't necessarily want to go down a tangent in regards to that, but still, this aspect it still holds true. This aspect of separating ourselves from the social media and trying to make our focus Allah, and trying to make our focus the book of Allah, and trying to make our focus the messenger of Allah. And so, you know, this is, and if we make our focus that, then that will help to get rid of those other desires. As the Prophet mentioned, is that when you leave something for the sake of Allah, Allah will give you something better. Or should I say, that may have been a verse of Quran. But in any case, when you leave something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you something better. And so, you know, again, I'm speaking to myself before I'm speaking to any of you. How can we separate our hearts from God's when every day there are more atrocities and more harm? It is so hurtful, but I need to be aware. I need to participate with my concern in some way, inshallah ta'ala. The thing is that you shouldn't try to separate your heart from what's going on in Gaza. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned about the ummah. He said that the ummah is like one body, that if one portion of it is feeling pain, then the entire body breaks out in fever, or the entire body feels it. And so we should never separate our hearts from the people in Gaza, or the people in um uh or the people in China, or the Muslims that are the Uruguay Muslims, or any of the Muslims in any of the lands that are going through difficulties and hardships. And during this month of Ramadan, we should use these blessed nights to make the most sincere dua that we can for the brothers and sisters in Gaza, the brothers and sisters in China, the brothers and sisters in Indonesia, the brothers and sisters in the Philippines, the Uruguay Muslims, all of the Muslims, that we should use this time to do that, and whatever means that we have to assist them, that we should take those means. And so, you know, we should not separate our hearts. So I don't have any advice to give in terms of separating our hearts, but rather that we should strengthen our heart connection to the Ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, but especially in these times of Ramadan, using that to connect our hearts to Allah and asking Him to give us victory. Because as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, An-Nasr, the victory, help is only from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah knows best. But yeah, so I mean, this is what I would suggest for all of us is that, I would say probably for the bulk of us, and this is just an assumption, but I would say that probably for the bulk of us, if we can limit our engagement in the screen and place our focus back to the book of Allah and the sunnah of the messenger of Allah sallam, and the righteous, and trying to keep the company of those who are trying to be in this wavelength, that is how we're going to maximize our Ramadan this particular year in the spiritual aspect. Now, the thing is that we could have, gone through the text, word for word, so to speak, or like, but the thing is that I knew already that we were going to be short on time, and to try to combine, like, for example, one of our friends, one of our teachers, Sheikh Yahya, he did a Ramadan prep, and he actually did it in two sections. He did one section that was focused on the spiritual aspect, and then he did another section that was focused on the fiqh aspect of Ramadan. And so I knew us trying to do it, and also this is not the first time I've done this, so I knew that this is not necessarily something that you can necessarily do in a 2 hour session in terms of like all the details that can be talked about. But I feel that, especially, speaking about it, I feel that for many of us, that many of our spiritual sicknesses that we have, a lot of it stems from our reliance on the small screens in all of their different manifestations. And that's, because like I said before, like even the aspect, like even if you want to argue, say to me that, I make sure that I don't look at, haram women or haram men for me and these type of things, is that, even from the aspect of the spin culture, is that, advertisements are always going to be prevalent. You may even look at, one thing, and then all of a sudden everywhere you go online is following you. You get an advertisement for, for this device, and then, you see it pop up on here, or you see the competitor's device that's, and so on and so forth. So my advice to all of us is to unplug and plug into the Quran, plug into the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu. So for example, um, you should have the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, but for example, you can supplement it, you can't, by, for example, going over the Shamal al-Muhammadiyah from Imam at-Tirmidhi, for example, that, you and your family. So, for example, for those of you who have children, one of the things that you can do, and this can, fulfill some of the things that we talked about earlier on in terms of the recommendations in Ramadan, is that one of the things you can do with your family is that, you know, sometime before iftar, or any, even at the time of suhoor, or something like a time where all the families read together, you can pick up the Shema al-Muhammadiyah, for example, and go through a section. Allow for your children to know who the Prophet ﷺ was. Give them a description of the Messenger of Allah. We always talk about how we want our children to be good Muslims and so on and so forth. And you're asking, like, how can I get them to be good Muslims and so on and so forth? You can ask yourself the question, do they know about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ? If they were actually described the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, would they be able to? Do they know how he laughed? Do they know how he smiled? Do they know how he slept? Do they know how he ate? Do they know how he dressed? The question becomes like, how can you love someone that you don't know? So that's something that you can incorporate, as well. You can read some of the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, read some of the books on the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but whatever the case may be, it's just trying to do your best to have your day filled with dhikr, remembrance of Allah. So even, when you go to work and or you go to school, or whatever the case may be, trying to remember the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad in it. So if I go to work, that's, during this month of Ramadan, that I'm making sure that I'm trying to do my work with ihsan, that I'm trying to do with beauty. That the people that annoy me at my job, I'm not going to give into it. I'm going to take the prophetic advice. And I'm fasting. That if they come to me with some type of uh, nonsense, so to speak, that I just remind myself, and I'm fasting. And I just let it go. That when I'm doing my work, that again, I try to do it with ihsan. That I do a good job, not because I'm trying to get a promotion, not because I'm trying to impress the boss, not because I'm looking to get a raise or a bonus, but I'm doing it. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves beauty. He loves ihsan. And so, having all these things in mind, and again, having that closer connection to the Quran, having that closer connection to the Messenger of Allah, sallam, these are things that are going to help to assist you while you're going through your everyday activities that are going to continue in order to be able to, you know, get you through the day, so to speak. And then, and I'll leave off with this because we already somewhat talked about it before, is that when we go to eat, whether it be suhoor or iftar, that we go light. So I mentioned before the aspect of having good quality, nutrition dense foods, but also being light in terms of what we eat. Because the aspect of it is that one of the reasons why Ramadan oftentimes is a time where it's easier to be quote unquote spiritual is because you're reducing the nafs, you're reducing the ego. And so when you break your fast in particular, even if you're eating healthy food, don't eat a whole bunch of it. Don't try to get full. Eat just enough so that you're no longer feeling those hunger pains. And then this way, you can focus on the ruh, you can focus on the soul. One of the ulama, he used to say about himself, he said that he used to never like to read the Quran during the day of Ramadan. And people would ask him, like, why? Like, that sounds weird. Like, why would you say that you don't like to read the Quran during the day of Ramadan? And so he responded to them by saying, he said, I don't like to read the Quran during the day of Ramadan because every time that I read the Quran, it feels like I have the sweetness of honey on my tongue. And so it feels like I'm cheating because it feels like I'm breaking my fast every time that I read the Quran. So the thing is, the reason why I mention that is that there's some people who they have such a connection to the Quran and they have such a connection to the word of their Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they have such a connection to their Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala that is as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is nourishing them even through their recitation. To the point that this one, this particular alim just said that, it just feels like I'm cheating because it feels like I'm eating honey every time that I recite the Quran. So there was a question, how do you balance spiritual practices? I spend a lot of time with the Quran and at times that impedes my morning adhkar. So the thing is that everyone in general should have a wird. They should have a regular regiment of spiritual practices that they do. However, in the month of Ramadan, because Ramadan is the Shahr Quran, is the month of the Quran, then you want to try to increase in everything that you do. So if you start to see that your regular adhkar that you are doing, you're not able to necessarily do it because you're trying to fill in that time with the Quran, then you try to see how you can try to adjust your schedule. Meaning that if you have a particular wird where you're supposed to do certain adhkar during the morning time, then what you can try to do, because also from the standpoint of the month of Ramadan, is that the month of Ramadan is also going to be a month of sacrifice. So what you can try to do is that get up a little bit earlier than you normally would. So for example, as we mentioned before, suhoor is a sunnah that you shouldn't miss. So, but the thing is that when you get up for suhoor, you don't have to spend that whole time just eating. Like, I'm just going to eat all the way up until fajr. So what you can try to do is that again, be light with the suhoor. You know, if you, especially like if you have like a smoothie or something like that, you can, I don't rush and try to, swallow it down, but you can drink a smoothie in a fairly short period of time, and then have a practice of having at least 15 minutes or so before Fajr comes in that you can dedicate to acts of worship, so that, you know, that way you can have time even before Fajr comes in where you can do different acts of ibadah, whether that's going to be a time that you're going to use for the Quran, or it's going to be a time that you're going to use for your other afkar that you're doing. And then, after Fajr, then maybe you'll do your Quran or the afkar. But, trying to maintain, because again, Ramadan is a time that you want to increase your ibadah. So the ibadah that you're already doing, you don't want to take away from that, but you actually just want to increase on top of that. So again, it might be a sacrifice. It might be a sacrifice that I'm going to be sacrificing even more of my sleep than I normally would. And if you're, having a situation with, tiredness, then trying to see if you can squeeze in the sunnah of a qaylula. And actually, I just actually, when I was talking to my doctor, he was mentioning that even from a medical perspective, a midday nap is something that they recommend for all people to do, but they actually recommend that you only do it within like a half-hour frame time, meaning that you only sleep for about a half hour. So even if you're at work, that since you're not going to be eating now, that if you're at work and you need to have need a rest, then maybe if you like drive to work, if you go to your car and just try to take a quick, half-hour nap or so, uh, to kind of refresh you a little bit. So does that help? And also, if you're not tired during that work break, then you can, spend that time as well to do more ibadah. Did that help? Okay. Would a dental appointment break our fast? I'm getting a crown placed on Monday, and the dentist typically use a word or two during the appointment. So a dental procedure in and of itself wouldn't break the fast, but if something goes down the throat, it would. So the thing is that again, it will be a situation that you can consider it that if you can switch the appointment to after Ramadan, it would be better. But the thing is that it's very likely that Ramadan won't even start on Monday, so you might be good either way. But like for example, if you're going based upon calculations, then yes, Ramadan would start on Monday. But from the standpoint of moon sighting, um, uh, the from the standpoint of moon sighting, they're saying that it's very unlikely to be able to spot the moon on Sunday night. Allah knows best. But in any case, if you're able to reschedule it to after Ramadan, that would be better because the likelihood of something going down the throat is very likely. But again, a dental procedure in and of itself is not going to break the fast again unless something goes down the throat. But the thing is that it's very likely that something would go down the throat. So that's why I was saying that if you can reschedule it for after Ramadan, that would be better. But if it's something that needs to be taken care of, like, you can't, and it's a medical emergency that needs to be taken care of, then, you'll possibly be excused if something were to go down the throat, but the fast would still be invalidated. And so you just need to make it up after Ramadan is over. Yeah, so I'm not sure if there's another position that will say that it starts tomorrow. I know that those who are going based upon calculations that they're going to start the first day of fasting is going to be Monday. And so the first night of Taraweeh will be Sunday, meaning tomorrow night. And then I know that people who are waiting for moon sighting are going to be looking for the first time tomorrow night. So I don't know if there was another uh, position that would say that it starts tomorrow. Allahu Alam. I mean, usually we get at least two, sometimes three possible days. So, uh,
yeah, it wouldn't surprise me, so to speak. Right. So inshallah, I hope that inshallah there was some benefit to tonight, and jazakallah khairan for all of you for being with us tonight. Please forgive me for my shortcomings, and I pray that all of you will be blessed to reach Ramadan, and that this will be the best Ramadan that you've ever had, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase you in nearness to Him and will allow for you to receive the full benefits of the month of Ramadan, and allow for you to only increase after this Ramadan and every subsequent Ramadan that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may bless you with. And so, inshallah, we will leave you all in Allah's care. Ramadan Mubarak. And inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from us all. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. الله سبحانه وتعالى أعلم واسمنا ونعم الوكيل. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.